more control in Web3. So who knows what time it is where you're at. And Darren, you're on the other side of the planet, man. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me. It's 9 a.m. in Sydney. So been up for a few hours.
Fabulous. We're crossing paths. So full disclosure right off the bat, Darren is also a yWhale /YPO member. So this is a fabulous conversation. I'm not going to let him off any hooks here, but absolutely want to make sure that's disclosure. Darren, let's start off with, what was your first exposure into kind of, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Web3 tech?
Yeah, so it was about 5 years ago, just to spend 20 seconds on before that as well. I'm a private equity guy. I'm not a tech guy at all. Spent 15 years as a partner in one of the largest Australian-owned private equity firms, and left 6 years ago now to run a family office with my father. My dad's an insomniac, so he's up all night watching various news channels and reading papers, and he just came into the office one day saying, "What's this bloody Bitcoin?" To which I said, "Oh, I don't know, I've heard of it, but I've got no idea what it is." And from there, really, and just that one comment he made sort of put me down a rabbit hole. And I spent a few months trying to look into it, understand what the hell a Bitcoin was, what the hell is a cold storage wallet, how do I buy it and trade it and, do anything with it. And it was really from there that I took an interest. It's not sort of the main priority in my role as running a family office, but certainly the last 6 months it's been about 80% of my time. I sort of got relatively early on when the ICO craze sort of came out. I had some friends in Hong Kong who were more into it and more connected than me, and I told them I wanted to participate in some ICOs, and they said, "Oh, there's this one you should try to put in some money into." And so there's one called yWhales early on where I put 25 grand in and my dad put 25 grand in as part of Sandbar investments. And I really expected to lose it all. And I got a call from my Hong Kong mate one night saying, "Oh, this thing's going to do its ICO. You should take a look, just watch the screen and see what happens." And so I had a look and I saw it come on. I thought, "Oh, this is pretty good. I'm up 10 times my money straight away. That's unbelievable." And then I pulled out the calculator and realized I was a zero out and it was up literally 100 times. And I called my mate and said, what the hell is going on? Is that normal? And he said, "I haven't even got my tokens issued yet." So I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Just sell them. That's ridiculous. Sell them." So literally, and there was hardly any liquidity. I did an all-nighter, my first one in a while, and spent all night just literally selling them. And so from that, thought, how easy is this? Thought I was a genius, of course. No luck at all. And had I've literally just kept the money and done nothing else with it, I would have been better off for the next 3 years. But of course, that's not what I did. And I went into all these other ICOs, and most of them are still illiquid and a total waste of time and worth zero. But out of that, there were 2 or 3 other ones that I participated in that I still haven't sold any tokens in. One is an Israeli project called Koti. One is a project that was called Haven. It's now called Synthetics, which is a reasonably decent sized sort of DeFi project out of Australia. And so just being lucky off the back of that initial wax investment, it gave me some float and gave me some margin for error in terms of making some early mistakes. And as part of, I guess, having some wins as well, it allowed me to build a bit of a network, in particular in Australia. And a lot of what I do at the moment is with 2 or 3 other partners who are also co-founders of the Polemos business that I'm sure we'll get to.
I mean, absolutely fabulous story. And it's so easy to get excited in the bull markets. And I'm wearing my bullish shirt today because the market is doing everything but that. And the fact that you were able to go from, really just what is the space? And from a VC perspective, it's really hard to kind of disconnect your brain from the traditional securities and everything else that we deal with and deal in this unsecured space that anything could happen. I mean, they can retract tokens, they can do all sorts of things. There's plenty of rug pulls. And so congrats on, your first 1000X. And you're right. Had you walked away and it probably would have been a different story, but that's just the first, dose of the addiction that you clearly have.
Yeah.
And so, now as you've kind of, grown this network and you're more involved in, and you've been around and you've nurtured so many companies over the years. But now that you're kind of involved in Web3, how's it difference? What's the feeling difference from, kind of the old school VC work that you were doing compared to like the people that you work with?
Yeah, well, look, I was normally more a private equity guy than a VC guy. So, and the company I used to work for, it was called Champ Equity. We were known to be a very hands-on manager and owner of businesses, for better or worse. But every company that I've historically been involved in terms of the private equity portfolio that I've built with my father at Sandbar Investments, my father or more often myself are on the board, have weekly, if not daily calls with our management teams that are involved in all decision making. And so I'm sort of used to being quite hands-on and being involved strategically. So now what I'm doing in crypto more than anything is sort of seed investing and then hanging on and holding for yield. We've got about 15, maybe it's somewhere between 15 and 20 sort of seed stage projects, quite a few of which have progressed. Most of them, we've not sold any original tokens other than, maybe selling some tokens we've got from yield farming or whatever the staking protocol is. But all of those projects, we do know the founders, and we're not having weekly calls, but we have dialogue where we do understand at a relatively high level the roadmap and what's going on. So I'm trying to, I guess, apply some private equity principles or some principles of no project is going to be any good if the management team's rubbish. And so having communication with the management team and not just throwing darts at a board and not just going to projects that I've heard are good but I've got no idea who the management team are. Or I've got no idea about them, and trying to be a little bit specific and forming a view on management before I make a decision as to whether I want to invest even at a seed stage has been what's worked for us so far. Our strike rate's been pretty good, but to be fair, that's been in a very hot market, even though there's some wobbles the last few months. So again, I'm not fooling myself that I'm a genius, and I think most people that are investing in seed stage projects are all doing pretty well at the moment. But I'm trying to have a philosophy of keeping the bar high, notwithstanding deal flow is very good, and I think it's going to improve based on, in particular, the Polemos investment and the deal flow that will come off the back of being a new place.
And before we get into that one, I want to just touch on one more point that you said, and it's something that really is so far escaping Web3. And you're talking about the teams and the maturity and investing. And one of the oldest sayings is you invest in the team, you invest in the founder, you invest in kind of their work ethic, and a little bit less on what they're currently doing. Because if it's a good team, they're going to pivot. They're going to pivot multiple times and they're going to take feedback. and unfortunately, in Web3 space, as we can see, people are throwing way too much money at projects that have absolutely no ability, or even the thought of the ability to execute on their roadmaps. And we're seeing now the destruction of Ohm and so many of those forks from the fact that these, while they're geniuses in their own right to do what they did, they did not have the team or the foundation built to be able to back up what they launched and did, because they just jumped too early.
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the biggest thing I struggle with, I'm not the world's most numerate person, but in private equity, you do financial models and you spend a lot of time understanding the financials of a project. And obviously the businesses that we're looking at are far more established. But, I don't know how many discussions I've had with sort of founders and early stage projects, but not once have we had any discussion whatever about the numbers, even the revenue, let alone the profitability. So there's still a massive disconnect. And I think it speaks to the heat of the market and the fact that we are in a bubble, that so many of these projects are so far away from generating revenue, let alone generating, profitability. And it's not even something most people focus on. And it should be, to be honest. And certainly the earlier you go into a project, the harder it is to obviously make assessments as to how good or bad this thing can be. But, I've got an analyst at Sandbar, and he keeps hassling me and saying, well, where's the model for this? And I'm like, well, there is no model. Management team don't even model. And he says to me, well, this thing's worth like $8 billion in market cap. How can they not have a financial model? And it's, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's for worse, not for better or worse, but I'm sure that's how it was in the tech boom. And I'm sure that's why there's going to be a massive reckoning at some point, and a lot of companies with no prospects for genuine profit growth that are raising money today will struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that, I hate using the word bubble because I'm not that smart to be able to predict it, but there's clearly some imbalance in the force. There is too much money. There's not enough talent. There's not enough coders. We're still so early. And I think that's kind of, the last point I want to make and really ask you is, on that scale, when people talk about kind of like 92 through 99 for Web 1, where do you feel we are closer to kind of actually mainstream adoption of just the majority of the world saying like, yeah, I'm willing to log in. I'm willing to try Web3.
It's a good question. And I think from an investment perspective, it's harder to know. I mean, there's just so much heat in the market and there's still so little institutional investment. So I think that's what's the massive, there's so much more demand than supply in terms of just money itself. But in terms of your question about crypto adoption, I think it's still a while away. I mean, it's just at the moment, crypto is still so unintuitive, as we've seen just on, minting crystal whales, which I still haven't worked out how the bloody hell to do. There's so many things in crypto that are just not that easy. And I'm sure, I didn't really invest and I was a bit too early in my career to really remember sort of the tech boom and to have participated in that. And I think it was harder to participate in that unless you had, an account with Goldman and Morgan Stanley and whoever else. But I think surely it will be the case that crypto usability and user friendliness will just become more and more mainstream and understandable to the average person. And I think that's currently one of the biggest barriers. I also think crypto is so much more universal, and it might well be the case that it's the third world or emerging companies that take up adoption rates of particularly those that are more mobile centric, which is the case in even Africa and South America and parts of Asia. So it might not be the case that it's the first world countries that are leading the charge in terms of mainstream crypto usage, but it's it's certainly years away, not months away. But it doesn't feel like it's decades away either.
Listen, if we had that crystal ball, we would certainly have be doing a lot better on some days. But the reality is, I think it's clear it's coming. It's no longer an if; it's just a matter of when and what it's going to look like. So, with that being said, and as someone who's very involved in the formation of some of these companies and really allowing them the ability to work on what they're good at and pulling back from the fundraising thing, which, I'm terrible at and a number of other people are horrible at. Let's talk about Polemos and, kind of where we're at today and what is it and when can we see it?
Okay, so if I take a step back and just explain the thematic, so play to earn gaming, I think is going to be a massive new development in crypto if it's not already. So just to explain what that means, at the moment, the gaming industry globally is absolutely enormous. I think it's bigger than film and free-to-air TV combined. And at the moment, if you think about Fortnite or World of Warcraft or some of the main games, that predominantly are played by sort of 20 to 40-year-old males. People are spending tens of thousands of dollars for a blue armor suit or a yellow shield or whatever in-game asset that has no intrinsic value. And if Fortnite shut down tomorrow, there's nothing you could do with that asset. And there's no concept of tradability or value of that asset other than what someone chooses to pay for it. What the blockchain allows in gaming, which I think is probably stating the obvious, is a token economy within a game where you can cash out. And if you have that blue armor in a game that's blockchain based, you can actually sell it, not just for the in-game token, but obviously you can convert that back to Filipino pesos or Australian dollars or US dollars or ETH or whatever else. And so there's going to be a massive revolution in the gaming industry, which again is in the tens of billions already, where if there are games that come out that are as enjoyable and interesting to play as a Fortnite and a World of Warcraft, but you can actually make money as part of playing that game, it's a no-brainer that gamers are going to gravitate to those new sorts of games. And so there is going to be an enormous number of new games from the massive global game developers, as well as sort of indie and smaller developers, where games today, if you're coming out with a new one, you're going to just make it blockchain based, because you can create the tokenomics and you can create the ability for people to make money from the games that they're actually playing. As part of that, and the leader, the sort of first mover in that is a game called Axie Infinity. It was developed by some guys in Vietnam. It's generating, tens of millions of dollars of in-game economics a week. And I think it's predominantly the Philippines, but people all around the world are playing this game, and it's got millions of users. And my stats are out of date, but as of a few weeks ago, I think there was like $180 million of revenue generated in the space of like a fortnight just to people playing that game. It's come down a little bit in the last few weeks, but the numbers are massive. It's not even a particularly good game. It's not that challenging. The graphics are okay, but it's got a fantastic first mover advantage, and they've executed really, really well. Separately, and I know there was a podcast recently with one of the guys from Yield Guild Games. They are the first mover in creating a guild, and what that is basically an organization which, on the one side, has a balance sheet of assets that are required to play a particular game, and on the other side, it recruits people that they call scholars, which are people that typically can't otherwise afford to own the assets they need to play the game or to progress in the game, and it basically matches them up in return for revenue sharing, and it allows someone from, say, the Philippines to that can't afford to buy 3 Axies, which is what is required to actually play Axie Infinity. The Yield Guild game says, well, we'll give you the 3 Axies, we'll loan them to you in return for 50% of the revenues or 30% of the revenues that you earn, you give back to us. And the blockchain facilitates that in a way that means that the actual NFT assets that are lent out can never be stolen or nothing can happen to them. They're always still owned by Yield Guild Games. And it creates a market economy, and the games love it because the guilds assist the games with bringing a community and bringing loyalty and allowing increased playership of the specific game. So YGG and Axie have really created a first mover advantage and done an excellent job. And there's lots of other guilds out there. There's Merit Circle, just raised $100 million plus. There's an Aussie, another guild called Perion, which I think lists in the next couple of days. And what we've gone and done, myself and 4 other co-founders have created a guild, which we've called Polemos. Again, we're not the first mover, but we think we've got some really interesting differentiators that will hopefully position us as being one of the top couple of guilds to really dominate the play to earn space in the next few years. Yeah. So if I just spend a few minutes on the differentiators, if that's okay.
I want to take a half second real quick, and for people who have never played Axies and haven't watched the YGG interview, describe a little bit about basically the people that are generally playing this, and we hear a lot about play to live. So you've heard for decades about people in third world countries you just grinding in games, essentially just sitting around in World of Warcraft, doing whatever they can to get a piece of gold, and then they go sell it on the internet and everything else. And what Axies and YGG has done is kind of, again, transition that to blockchain and make it go much faster. The fact that they're able to do it that much faster, that much quicker, is you now have the ability for people that live in third world countries and can utilize this game on a crappy little $50 Android device, which is generally, again, uses cellular. Most of the people that are using this don't have full internet or big computers with GPUs and everything else. So it's created an economy, especially in the global pandemic world, of people that can earn money at home to pay for things that they actually need. And gamers from that have more fortunate or want to buy these can purchase them very quickly in marketplaces, and the transactions that the blockchain and smart contracts create just makes that so much more fluid. So I just want to make those clarifying points. But now, absolutely, yes, let's hit on the differences between Axies, which has been around for years, and some of the new ones that are coming up.
Yeah, so just to add to that point, Jay, and again, their numbers, I'm not sure what they are as of today, but as of a couple of weeks ago, I think the average player playing Axie full-time with the support of a guild, earns $300 to $400 US a month. So, it's a lot, but it's not a lot for those, I guess, in the Western world. But that's, that is above average income for a blue collar job in the Philippines. So there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in places in Africa that are literally quitting their jobs and becoming full-time gamers with the support of guilds, and earning a better income in arguably better conditions than whatever their previous job was. And I think that's a revolution to come. There's different arguments about is that good or bad for the world and for those people just sitting inside playing a game all day, but that's their choice.
Yeah, and I like to make some statements every now and then on the podcast because we can. I think it's a fabulous thing. I don't think there's anything negative at all. As you said, it's completely optional, and more than that, it's allowing people to start to utilize their brain and their thought process and technology. So the thought that somebody is taking a second and learning how to use blockchain using a game is a fabulous idea, because we heard from Gabby and whatnot is that a majority of these people are then graduating. They're understanding economics. They're understanding how to buy their own axes, which are thousands of dollars. So it may take them months to be able to earn them, but then they're starting their own, they're bringing people underneath them, or they're leaving axes altogether and moving to the DeFi world because now they understand tokenomics and they understand crypto. And so I absolutely think that play to earn, play to live is a fabulous first step in a third world country towards economic independence.
I think that's right. I think I'm slightly dreading family friends in Australia coming and screaming at me because their 10-year-old kids are not going to school and they're spending their whole time in front of a computer screen trying to earn money when they should be outside kicking a football. But that's a different argument and certainly not our target market. So if I just hopefully I've described in a way that makes sense what a guild is. If I speak to some of the things that we're trying to differentiate ourselves to a YGG and to the other players out there that we've got huge respect for, the first one is in terms of our shareholder base. So of the 5 founders, two of them, one of them is the major shareholder and the other one is the CEO of a company called Asian Logic. Asian Logic is the 3rd biggest online casino company in the world. They've got 5,000 plus employees, millions of people that play online casino games. And we're not actually partnering with them for the gambling side of things necessarily, but there's a few real benefits they bring as a major shareholder into Polemos. The first one is just from their employees. So that their 5,000 employees are all based in third world countries, Philippines, Vietnam, some in South America, some in Africa, and Asian Logic are allowing their existing employees to become guild members of Polemos and to use their work PCs in their overtime to play the games that we're supporting. The main game that we will be supporting initially is a game called Alluvium. It hasn't started yet. It's meant to come out in February or March of this year, and it's going to be the first sort of AAA rated game. And there's a huge amount of buzz and excitement about the potential of that. Huge amount.
So, and because it's not been released, and I'm assuming that you guys have seen a little bit behind the curtain. What can you say about Alluvium? Because I know that they not only do they have the game side of it, but they're also selling land.
There's a land sale coming up. So the founder, Kieran, is an advisor to Polemos. He's doing an AMA with the Polemos guys tomorrow if anyone's interested in joining the Discord for Polemos. But it's basically an auto battler game where it's a really deep, broad metaverse that they've created where you have an avatar and you run around this world and you have to find alluvials, which is the equivalent of mining different sort of minerals that if you get those minerals, you get certain attributes that assist you to then go and fight animals in the digital world. And the more animals that you basically conquer, the more strengths and attributes you get, and the more coins that you earn as part of creating an economy. And the more easy you can progress to further stages or further worlds within the Alluvium ecosystem. They've spent like tens and tens of millions of dollars on game development and have recruited some of the world's best game developers and software engineers and designers. So the quality of the graphics and the experience, I think, will be just amazing. And we've got a really good relationship with Kieran and with the team. There are a bunch of 3 actually Aussie guys that live in Sydney that are the main owners of that game. And we think we'll be as well positioned as any guild or anyone to monetize and to be successful in that game. And they're really supportive of Polemos because they know that we're going to bring a great community across, including Asian Logic's workforce who are able to use their PCs to play the game initially. So a real differentiator is Illuvium won't have a mobile friendly version of the game for another year or so. So the fact that we will have up to thousands of people that can use an existing work PC to play the game brings a community straight away into the game much quicker than some of the other guilds or other people might be able to realize, noting that a lot of the other guilds, most of their community have a mobile phone but don't necessarily have a computer. So
when you're I don't mean to stop, but I want to focus on a few things there. So how different is this type of investment that you're making? The game hasn't been released. The technology is bleeding edge, brand new, and the numbers around it, the dollar figures around this are like monopoly money. I mean, it's insane how much capital is flowing into this, how much talent is flowing into this. I mean, how do you guys value the opportunity here, and is there even anything else on your radar besides one of the largest AAA or the first AAA blockchain game coming out?
Yeah, so we've committed to 5 different games already. Another one we're really, really excited about is called Monkey Ball. That's an Israeli project that'll be the equivalent of 3-on-3 street soccer, where the players are actually monkeys that have different attributes. So Polemos will own like 1,000 monkeys based on a seed stage investment that we made, and those monkeys, we can breed them. Hopefully they can have a monkey logo. There's a game called Fancy Birds that's a much simpler, less complex game, but in a sense is probably going to be more addictive, where we own, I think it's 80 Polemos branded birds, and it's one of those games that you literally press the space bar and the bird goes up, and if you don't, it goes down, and you've got to just go as far down the path without touching anything. So much simpler but more addictive, something that people can just play on the train on their phone without needing to concentrate too much, but also with a tokenomic model where you can actually earn money for playing that game. There's a game called Legends of Inari, and another game called Guardians of the Galaxy that we've also supported as well. So we are trying to diversify, but not in a way that we're so broad that we can't actually focus and pay attention and become leaders in each of the games that we're choosing to sponsor. We've got a head of guild we've got a funnel of 150 plus games that we're sort of in various stages of communications with and working out if we want to commit to them, and if so, how much. And so the funnel and the volume of games is almost overwhelming, and no guild is going to be able to provide access to every single game. So we've got a relatively high bar, and we want to play to our strengths. We're not all in on Illuvium, but we certainly are making a big bet on Illuvium in particular, in wanting to absolutely be what YGG is to Axie. We want Polemos to be to Illuvium, is I guess the analogy. But if Illuvium were to be delayed by 6 months or not to be as great as people hope, we do have other games in our inventory that we're working on, playing and forming deep relationships with the management team. So whereas across the details of the game as well as possible. One thing, just another differentiator, if I can just get back to sort of, I think what makes us different, is we're coming up with sort of Polemos University, where we want to provide really high quality content to our guild members. And the way we're structuring things, as a guild member, you sort of start at the bottom. There's 5 or 6 different tiers of membership, and each tier you get a different NFT from Polemos. And the higher up the tier you go, the more educational content and strategy and development opportunity you get, and more the quality of the NFTs that you get access to increases over time. So we really want to have super high quality video and podcast and different type of content. The other real differentiator that we haven't seen any guilds do at the moment, but we think could be really game changing, and some of the VCs that have invested in us are super excited about this, is at the moment the way most of the guilds are set up is on the one side you have the members called scholars typically, who are the players, and on the other side you have a balance sheet where a YGG has to own all these axes or whatever it is, the in-game NFT that they're playing that they can lend out. We're going to create a marketplace which will allow whales and investors to actually participate and to monetize their NFTs in a different way that doesn't exist at the moment. So I, for example, invested in a whole lot of monkeys outside of Polemos, and I own some other in-game assets in some things that maybe we'll get onto in a second, where I don't have the time or the inclination to actually use these NFT assets. I'm just banking on them going up over time. But we're creating a marketplace and a platform that will allow me or anyone else that owns lots of NFTs that isn't going to actually use them day to day to put them on our website and allow them to be lent out or sold or used as collateral in some way where they can be monetized in a much more useful way, whilst they still contain ownership, but they'll benefit in revenue sharing from people actually using that particular NFT, whether it's training them up or playing it in a soccer game or using it in Illuvium or whatever else. And so the marketplace, I think, achieves a few benefits. A, it gives us more scale. B, it means we probably don't have to invest as much in our own balance sheet to have the in-game assets there, and others can provide them. They're probably the main two things.
Yeah, and I think that you're also, you've hit on a few points here that really people need to understand. And you're talking about NFTs. So as much as we're talking about in-game items, characters, all that other stuff, it all comes back to these are utility NFTs that have value outside of the artwork. And, we saw very clearly in 2021 that there's just the boom of profile picture NFTs and just these, a lot of artwork. And I don't understand it. I've never been an artwork guy, or traditional or digital. But I think you're going to see a big shift in a lot of where the dollars have been going to when suddenly you have, just owning this NFT and either staking it or lending it or whatever the protocol ends up saying will earn you actual, ROI. That's going to be a real difference of what people are going to look at when they're investing in NFTs. It's all, as you said, there's 150 of these things coming out and they're not here yet. So that's going to be a very big disruption to this market if anyone's kind of a little heavy. And
I also think if you look at the current NFTs, so Bored Apes, and there's a Fluff World, which is, maybe we'll get onto it, something I'm quite excited about. There's a lot of sort of NFTs at the moment that have no intrinsic value, but those NFTs are then going to become play-to-earn games, and there's going to be increasing monetized opportunities as well. So it's sort of coming from both ends as to how to leverage or make more, get more value from the ownership of a specific NFT.
It's a dynamic change. My kid has spent thousands of dollars on entirely useless skins across various games, from Roblox to Fortnite to whatever the case is. And my God, there's just nothing you can do except just like accept your fate. And for any parent out there, it's just like, fine, whatever, for $10, I don't have to hear about this thing for the rest of the weekend. Good. But as soon as they stop playing those games, it's just done. Like, there's nothing left to do there.
Absolutely.
There's no resale value. There's no ROI. There's nothing they could do. And this is going to be a real dynamic change. And there's a lot of people that absolutely disagree with this, absolutely hate it. And you're seeing just a ton of FUD news around like how horrible this is. And that's a great opinion. We hear that every single day about Bitcoin, and the same as Bitcoin doesn't care. NFTs and blockchain games really aren't going to care. There are billions of people on this planet, and the thought that you can take someone in a third world country and allow them to provide a service directly with little to no middleman involved, that can enrich their lives and teach them actual valuable skills, I think is something to be applauded in this world, because we need more of that.
Look, I completely agree. We one of the other things that we've done in our tokenomic model is 1% of all our revenues going to go into basically a charity vault. So we're setting up a foundation where we want 1% of all the revenues are going to go specifically to the communities where our majority of guild members come from. So the way I'm envisioning that is that literally will be allowing people to buy air conditioners and fridges and microwaves and, community-based items that can assist in third world countries from the benefits of the revenues. So we are trying to create a bit of a virtuous cycle. We're not going to save the world by that 1%, but I think it hopefully can have some positive impact as it should. And, a part of it is, we're doing this to make money, to be fair, but, we do want to be a bit altruistic. And if we can assist people get out of a poverty cycle or own an electronic good that they've never had before or get access to power they've never had before, then
there's also, there's a few things, and I want to talk about tokenomics here in a second because you guys have a lot around that as well, trying to manage hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions around the globe doing this. So there's a very big scale to this. But again, I just continue coming back to, there's no one forcing anyone to play blockchain games. This is same as anything else. People are choosing to do these, and the fact that it's a growing, and when I say growing, meaning there's probably more money. And I'm totally guessing. Nobody quote me on this. But having looked at the numbers, and Darren, I'm sure you can come up with them. The amount of money going into blockchain gaming is probably going to be pretty close to equal to what's been going into AAA games over the last 12 to 18 months.
It's massive. Yeah. And it's just going to increase.
And so tokens. Let's talk about how you're going to manage all these people around the globe. Time zones are gone. They're just those are unfettered, and payments. When you're dealing with potentially hundreds of different currencies, you have your own. You guys are going to have your own token, correct?
We will have our own token, which will be PLMS. We're working on sort of doing an IDO in probably March or April of this year. We've just closed a sort of a seed round where we've had Delphi, QCP, Framework, IOSG, and some other relatively well-known.
I did not hear my name on that list. I was clearly that I don't match those names yet. So good for you. That's fabulous.
But we are working on the founder of Tokamak is an investor, and SushiSwap, and so we are thinking through the best way to achieve an IDO. I am working out if there's some way that if there are interested YPO whale investors that we can sort of provide some sort of benefit or whitelist, and I'll come back to you on that if there's interest. But I think we'll have a listing in the next couple of months. The way we've set up the tokenomics, a bit less than 20% is owned by the founders and the management team, including the 5 co-founders, of which I'm one. About 30% of the tokenomics are for a staking model, and we're working on having staking possible other than for the early stage investors. So for investors into the IDO and beyond, can immediately benefit from a staking mechanism that we'll be putting in place. There's about, I'll get the numbers slightly wrong, but 12 or 13% of the tokens are allocated specifically for us to give to people that play the games that we choose to support, in addition to the tokens they'll earn in playing that game. So as an example, in Illuvium or in Monkey Ball or Legends of Inari, if you're a guild member of Polemos, you can earn Polemos tokens as well as the tokens of that game for playing that game on behalf of us. So we think that's quite interesting, and from our perspective means why would you play for another guild if you can earn Polemos tokens as well as the tokens you're earning for playing that game? So it's an additional incentive from our perspective for the games to want to work with us, but also for our guild members to want to be playing as part of our guild. We think there will be guild members that will be Polemos and YGG and Merit Circle, and they'll pick and choose. But that's in our tokenomics. And
hey, listen, there's clearly people sitting in cars right now with Uber, Lyft, and like 2 or 3 other apps. So it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
So
and that's fine. It's not going to take the market.
Ethereum, Solana, where are you guys building this?
We'll probably be, the games themselves. So Monkey Ball's on Solana. Most of the other games are Ethereum. We will be Ethereum. We'll base our own Polemos token on Ethereum, but that won't impede us from being able to support games that aren't on the Ethereum blockchain. And we're working on a few sort of cross-chain tech investments in the background to just make sure that that's completely frictionless. And then effectively the remainder of the tokens will go to the in-game economics and supporting the actual Polemos model and incentivizing people to join our guild from staking, from actually playing the specific games, and to make sure that, you know, once the staking finishes, we have a circular economy that continues to be successful and profitable. Sorry, I did also mention, I forgot to mention, about 10% of the tokens are also allocated for us to be able to invest into new games. So as part of the games that we like, we don't have to have made an investment, but the ones that we like and identify early, we will seek to be owning NFTs and potentially in-game tokens and making investments to back the games that we want our guild members to play, or that we think our guild members will want to play.
Any type of governance with these tokens, any DAO-like features?
It will be. So we're at the moment, it's not a DAO, but the intent would be that we'll become a DAO down the track. It may or may not be a full DAO at the time that we do an offering. I suspect it won't be, and we'll probably take a few more months to get a few things into place. And we're using sort of Greek mythology and words, so that the equivalent of a board is called the Archon, and that's, you know, the members of that are voted in quarterly as a DAO, you know, as a lot of the DAOs work. So a lot of what we've done, we've based on Illuvium, having a lot of input from the Illuvium guys. Our staking model will likely be done similar to how Illuvium works. The concept of governance and voting is similar to the way they've done it. I neglected to mention of our CEO and our COO are both members of the Illuvium Council that get voted in every quarter. So we've got really deep relationships with them in particular. They've been really valuable in helping us think about things and to test our theses. And I think it's been a real win-win between the Illuvium guys and ourselves. If
anyone ever questions how early we are into Web3, I just want to point out you have some of the most talented VC and private equity guys in the world that are still trying to figure out how in the world to make this work. I mean, the rules. I mean, in a lot of this, we're waiting for regulation. Like for those of us professional investors, I know a lot of people are like, oh, no regulation, decentralize everything. We need to understand the rules of which to play. I mean, it's very hard to form a DAO. You know, especially here in the United States, like the last thing you want to do is accidentally create a security, which is super easy to do. And then, you know, the whole thing comes crashing down. So the fact that you guys are again, have decades of experience amongst you guys doing this, and you're still trying to go like, well, I think it's going to work like this. It just shows how early and how much work and how much energy is required in this space right now, because there's no one to copy off. There's no one to say, well, this is best practice. You're building the best practice right now.
No, well, I think that's right. I mean, we're based in Singapore at the moment. Notwithstanding, most of the founders are Australian, and I think Singaporean law is probably certainly more forward than Australia and the US, and there is precedent of other companies based in Singapore becoming a DAO. We're very conscious of our tax obligations in various countries and making sure that, you know, we are doing things by the book, but the book is still being written. So there is, I think, some regulatory risk. I think the reality is with, you know, a game, you know, there's not massive regulations on the gaming industry per se, other than China having rules on how often you can play certain games and things like that. China's not a particularly major target market of ours.
It's best to keep them away from everything right now.
Well, I think that's probably right. But we, you know, the rules are still being written, as I said, and so we want to play by the existing rules. And you know, we're doing everything right. We're over investing, I think, in management, in technology, in cyber security in particular, because you know, if things are going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong because we've stuffed up tech and we get hacked, or there's some cyber breach or something like that. We've got a new CTO. We'll be announcing who that is in a few weeks, who's like an absolute gun, and we're super excited. about the seniority and the quality of that person joining our team. Our CEO Sasha, who's a German guy who literally, at best, he's sleeping 2 hours a day at the moment. He's an incredibly hard worker who's doing just a phenomenal job in managing an international team. So we're really trying to do this. We're not a group of 18-year-olds with a good idea and just trying to make it happen and learning as we go. We're sort of experienced non-crypto executives that have come together, say, here's a great opportunity. How do we monetize it? How do we bring the best people in, work with the best sort of third parties in technology and various other ways? And how do we play the long game to really build what we hope will be, one of the leading guilds going forward?
And to be clear, and I always want to point out, I want to thank all of the 19-year-olds who blazed the trail because their risk tolerance was like, there is no risk tolerance. They just were doing something cool and they built it by themselves. And so we thank Valak and all these trailblazers for what they built. And now that we're starting to see the earliest stages of stabilization, you're starting to see the professionals show up, and we show, and teams like yours, Darren, are you're focusing on management, you're focusing on security, and you're focusing on protocols, which again, not to knock any of the early adopters in this, just don't exist. And that's why we're seeing so many major projects fail, is because it's not about raising money. It's not about user adoption. It's about the fact that they just truly don't understand how to scale a business when you're growing 10, 20, 30x, sometimes a month. It's just it's not sustainable.
And that's not to say we won't make mistakes, but we've made mistakes before. So if we're smart enough at least to learn from our past mistakes, we might make fewer than some of our competitors who may not have the same level of business and career experience.
So before we kind of jump on to the next section, I just have to ask you, has your dad, who in any way, have you been able to go to him and say, by the way, remember when you told me video games were a waste of time? Have you been able to throw this out at him at all in any way?
The irony is I'm not a gamer at all. I grew up playing Australian rules football and had a ball in my hand and was out in the garden as much as possible. I don't own an Xbox. I think I had an Atari and a Nintendo, and that was about the last time I played a game. So I'm not one of those guys that's an OG, and most of the time our team talks about a new game. I've never heard of it, and I wouldn't know how to play it for the life of me. So I'm probably not the stereotype. And as I mentioned earlier, it was his idea to say, what the hell is a Bitcoin? And so, I'm not sure if you listen to his definition of what Bitcoin is today, it would still make a whole lot of sense, but he absolutely loves it. And he and I are very close. I keep him very informed in all of the developments in crypto and what we're doing in Polemos and our seed investments. And he's taken a real interest in it. I mean, he's not I'm not a tech guy either. But certainly for a 72-year-old guy, he's much more up to speed on the crypto industry than the average 72-year-old out there, and he understands that it is the way of the future, and he wouldn't know which bets I think to make, and he's not spending anywhere near as much time as I am in the sector, but he's fully supportive of the decisions that I'm making, and a lot of the meetings that I have, he comes along and he's, asks great questions, and, he's very supportive. Which
Web3 really is, for anyone listening that's trying to understand, the differentiation between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. Web 1 was just this entirely different, way of life. You're now spending 4 to 5 hours in front of the computer. And Web 2 was an evolution. It was kind of moving that towards mobile and a few other things that defined it. Web 3 has not yet been defined. And the differences that are starting to show up in currencies, virtual and augmented reality. And so I applaud you and your father for just immersing yourselves in this, because we deal with new people every day. Every day I meet new people that are like, I want to understand Web 3. And the only way you can do it is just by diving in and spending the time, because some of these concepts don't make sense unless you use them, you understand them. And so, it's so cool to see the evolution of traditional finance guys really going and go, no. How do you even tell some of your TradFi friends what you're working on now? Do they just gloss over?
Well, they used to gloss over. Now they've all got massive FOMO. So, all of a sudden I'm much more popular than I used to be with a lot of my friends saying, oh, I want to be in this game. And they've heard I've okay on some seed stage investments, and they all want to be in. And I sort of have to say, well, look, the allocations are smaller than I'd want, so I don't really want to share them. But there's an early coin, an Israeli one that I got a few friends into, and nothing happened for a few years, and then all of a sudden it starts to pay a monthly dividend that's about roughly the same as what we all invested in the first place. And so, they're getting a monthly distribution payment. And for me, it's kind of a pain in the ass to work out how to split it out and calculate the dividend each month and send it through. And all they do is just get it and
so
love it.
Popular guy.
And I don't, there's dangers with working with friends, but it's kind of fun if you can make some money with your friends too. So some of my mates are now, I gave them a tiny allocation, I guess, into the seed round of the round we've just raised in Polemos. And, there's risk associated with that, but it's the amount they invested for all of them is an amount that if they did lose it all for whatever reason, it sort of wouldn't matter. But hopefully it can turn out to be a great investment for them, and I can bring them on the journey and help them, understand crypto a bit better and benefit from it in the same way as, a few years ago, there've been quite a few people that helped me along the journey and took the time to help me ask my dumb questions and to explain things or to give me access to things. And I do think it is much more a sharing economy in the same way as running a family office is much more collaborative. And I've got a great network of other family offices where we share deals with, which wasn't the case in private equity and venture capital, which is a bit more, I want to do all of a deal. And so it's much more competitive. It's much more fun working in industries that are more collaborative and when you can share things around.
Web3 is absolutely being defined by just openness. I mean, it literally, I have people that's like, oh yeah, here's that relationship I use. I know that you're going to be doing something similar. No problem here. Or, hey, we already wrote the code. Here's the source code. Just go ahead and you can fork it over yourselves. I mean, the space is so big. It's so wide open. There's no need to suppress or push down or try to dominate, because we have enough FUD and nonsense that we deal with from the rest of the world that, we're still trying to prove, we're here and we're here to stay. And I think that when you're talking to people like yourself and a lot of the people we do on this podcast, Web3 it's not a matter of if, it's just when is it going to hit that mainstream adoption. And I can absolutely see the vision that you guys have built out on Polemos and Polemos. I continually will struggle with that name for a minute, but absolutely love it. So pivoting to the fact that you're seeing so many deals and so many cool things in and around the Web3 space, what else is on your mind? What else is on your radar?
So probably two other things that I'm quite excited about. One is a new fund that I know I think you've just done a podcast with and might be doing a fireside chat. There's a new fund called the Max Stealth Outlier.
We record that next week. We record that one next week.
Okay, so without stealing their thunder, it's basically a fund that will co-invest in the pre-seed and seed stage rounds of all of the investments that go through Outlier's incubator program in London. So that fund will invest in sort of 150 to 200 deals. So almost taking an index approach initially and then co-investing. But the amazing, exciting thing is Outlier's process is 5,000 different companies apply every year to be part of this incubator. And they select the best sort of 180 or so each year. So there's the top 3% of deals funneled by a fantastic, incredibly successful team come into this program, get benefits of the program in terms of marketing input and tokenomic advice and all the things that are relevant for a young emerging company. And this fund will invest in pretty much all of them initially. And then we'll have rights to co-invest as well. So I think that's going to be a really interesting fund that certainly Sandbar, my father and I will be investing in. And again, that can be shared, I think, with the yWhales crew. I think it will be. The other one is an NFT project that I think is really interesting called Fluff World. The guys behind that they're called Altered State Machine. It's actually a bunch of New Zealand guys who I think used to work for Weta Studios, which is the Peter Jackson sort of Lord of the Rings film studio. So they've got amazing graphics, really creative guys. And New Zealand's just, I think, got a really interesting hub of crypto development. people at the moment. And Fluff World has this whole metaverse ecosystem that there's things called the Fluff Rabbits, and there's a group called Party Bears, and that they have artificial intelligence brains, and the brains can be matched into a bear or a rabbit, and the rabbits will soon be able to breed if you have a male and a female in the same background. And they're selling burrows, I think, at the moment as well. And based on their publicly announced sort of plans, that will become a play-to-earn game. Snoop Dogg's just bought a whole lot of burrows, and I think that they just seem to be doing all the right things in terms of coming up with a really interesting NFT. And as we were talking about earlier, the most successful NFTs are not just ones that's a piece of art or something that you own that has no other intrinsic value, but owning a fluff, which is a rabbit or a party bear, will actually lead to all these other airdrop opportunities, breeding opportunities, play-to-earn gaming opportunities, and just the development and the quality of the team behind it, I think is amazing. So we've sort of taken a few guys that I do some stuff with. We bought a few of the fluffs, and it's done okay so far. And I think that could be the next kind of Bored Ape type NFT.
I've never heard of Fluff, and I will go look into Fluff here shortly. But I want to just kind of like from
that is one, by the way. When I tried to explain that one to my dad, didn't go down very well. He's like, "Hang on, so you just spent how much buying rabbits?" I'm like, "Yeah, but they breed, Dad." He's like, "I know rabbits breed."
Listen, I will admit, I bought a whole bunch of the Logan Paul Crypto Zoo eggs that have been just an absolute disaster. From the fact that they put them on ETH, and you buy the egg for whatever it was, and then it was costing just as much, if not more, than the original mint price just to hatch them. And they don't have the game ready and everything else. But to circle back onto Fluff World, and I think a few points that are really, really relevant about the Web3 movement. These are games that are born from a community. And so you generally will have the founders and the initial visionaries, but then you already have essentially majority of the stuff, like you said, pre-sold. There's a community that's involved. They're giving feedback. There's no gaming studio that they have to, rely on for funding or to bring this stuff to market. So for the first time ever, we have this true, like, a fact that whatever somebody dreams, and if it's popular enough and it really is, it has adoption levels, it will make it to the mainstream versus what we have now, which is, hundreds of games a year that a VC or a private equity guy dumped money into on the promise that this is going to be the next thing, and they're in the $1.99 bin at GameStop, because no one ever bought it, no one cared. There was never an audience to begin with. They were just trying to churn stuff out and hope it happens. Now it's everything so directed, and Snoop's all over this, and I think that's going to be this is going to be the big year of the celebrities showing up and really grabbing a hold of these NFTs.
I have heard some rumors of some additional amazingly well-known people that might be entering the Fluff World soon. Which, if that was true, I think that'll be a step change in demand for these things too. But I think it was exactly as you were saying, Jen, which I totally agree with. It comes back to management, though. I mean, the guys behind this at Altered State Machine have amazing experience in terms of coming up with the right graphics, but have the vision and have the imagination and are communicating them that well, and have the right social media and have built the right community that are really excited to go along the journey. Now, there's hundreds of projects out there, and I'm sure there's plenty with much better graphics and plenty with much better vision, but the ones that bring it all together, I think, are going to be the successful ones going forward.
And especially for these, massive multiplayer games. I think that the biggest thing that is going to be the dynamic change is the fact that there's the community is involved, and there's an ability for the community to be involved. I mean, the amount of times we hear people screaming and yelling about, whatever World of Warcraft they did this or Eve that or whatever nonsense they did, it's because it was in a vacuum. Maybe they asked for some feedback, but there's a board that's just going to do whatever they want. Now there's a direct financial tie to ignoring your investors, which are your players, your community. And I think that, again, having people that understand that and from the get-go, like what Polemos is investing in, and I got the name right, and how engaged you guys are with the community and the tools that are being developed to interact with them. are something entirely different than's ever been seen before in the gaming world.
I agree. And that's what's exciting. I think there's lots of unknowns, and however we think things will play out will not be the case in reality. But I think the opportunity and the thematic is just so exciting, and so I'm happy to be a part of it, and I'm lucky. I've got some really smart partners who are incredibly dedicated and adding a huge amount of value and know more about crypto than me. And so far so good, but it's still very, very early in the journey, and we're really excited.
Well, fabulous. Absolutely love it. How can people learn more about Polemos and everything that Sandbar is kind of invested in right now?
Sandbar's updating its website soon. It's a bit out of date at the moment. And I'm not particularly prolific on Twitter or anything, but if you want to learn more about Polemos, our website's probably the best. Polemos.io is the website. There's a link to our white paper there. We'd love for people to join our Discord channel. We've only got a relatively few, I think we've got a few thousand people in Discord now, but in the next few weeks, I think that's really going to ramp up as we do some AMAs with the founder of Alluvium, Kieran, in the next few days, and as we start to sort of do some initiatives with some of the existing games that we've onboarded. So that'll build up in the next few months. But Discord is basically the best medium to understand what's going on within Polemos and to stay on top of
Fabulous.
things.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for everything. Really excited. Hang out here for a second. And for everyone else, thanks for checking this out, and we'll catch up with you soon.